We were the only tribe, and it was weaved for about 300 years until we lost it in the early 1940s. So to be able to regain it, weave it again, you know, it's a blessing, it's a miracle, you know, the way it happened. A lot of traditions are not in the books, you know, they passed on, and that's so important to, you know, keep alive, because you won't find it in the books. And that's why, you know, I think my parents, being born in a family that have carried on and have demonstrated, been at festivals, served on panels, you know, that was their way of telling me, keep this going, you know. Even our Houma French language, because a lot of the words that we use are old world French. And again, we still have some of the Houma words in the language, and that's a dying thing too. And I think if people are looking for our people, that's one of, especially people from Canada and France, we have that connection of the French language with them. And our people, like I said, I had to learn English. Our little Indian school was just where that water tower is. We would walk to it, and like I said, that was probably some of the first English that I heard and didn't quite understand. And to this day, I still think in French, and sometimes that's why I have difficulty speaking, because I have to reword it in English. Being Indian in Louisiana has not been so good. In my days, you really didn't have it in the school system. The Native American culture wasn't spoken of. It's coming around where people are actually, we have the Indian Education Program, which does a wonderful program. Like in November we go, and not only in November, because you know we don't want to be thought of only in November, Native American Month. We hear throughout the year, we have been here. So now it's just coming around where the teachers are asking for us to be in the classroom. When they do that unit on Native American, they ask us to come in and do a presentation. So it's very fulfilling, because if they asking me to come in to teach and speak of the Native culture, it's not only for our Native students, but it's also for the entire school system or class, which by sharing, you know, you also teaching the other cultures about our communities, our culture. And I think there's a lot about sharing that can go a long way, you know, making people aware, you know. It's so important, you know, to keep these traditions, because Louisiana would be changing if we didn't, you know. That's the sad part. And even today, you know, I see people, they're coming back. They want to learn about the culture. And if there's no one to teach it to them, to pass it on to them, it's going to be gone, you know. What we're known for down here is our bayous. It's like a hand. Bayou DuLarge, we're the largest bayou when the first explorers came. One of the things that has happened down here is the saltwater intrusion that's killing our plants, which plants are important to us as far as medicines and just the way of life with our people. Palmetto, even what I use to do the baskets, you know, I see a threat there. In years to come, it's going to be hard to find, not only because of the saltwater intrusion or the erosion problem, because a lot of times the palmetto is going to grow on the side of the bayou, and with the boat traffic, they just fall in. But also, people are wanting to come to live on the bayou, you know. I have palmetto plants out here, the leaves are green, and the process is that we get the heart of the palmetto before it opens up. The heart grows, there's two together, and I've always been shown that working with my dad, gathering and harvesting palmetto, that you don't rob the plant. And he would take, palmetto leaves to build the huts. But when I started doing palmetto baskets, those hearts grow together, so I would always take one and leave one for the plant. And once we get the heart, you have to dry it. With this particular weave, we didn't have anyone to go to ask questions. In fact, I left it alone after trying my hand at it, and it was a day that was very stressful. The shoulders were all tense, and I ended up saying, this is not for me. I went to the shower, hot water on the shoulders, cried and prayed a lot, prayed to the great Creator, prayed to my ancestors that if you had this gift, please pass it on. And so I came out very relaxed, sad, but I knew something was different. And so I sat down with the palmetto on my lap like this. It was almost like a come to Jesus meeting with the palmetto. I listened to it. I started feeling it. So one of the things I learned, the palmetto had a hard end. It comes from this end. This is the soft end. So I was just picking up palmetto and just weaving, and that hard end ended up working itself out and coming apart a lot of times. And by using the hard end as a weaver to go in and out like this, see, I can just go in there like this and come out, no problems. Our people always did cure moths. The women wore skirts made out of moss. Early women wore a cape over the shoulders, maybe with turkey feathers or even moss. The curing process involves that, and again, I'm going to talk about my sister-in-law, good talk. Her family, and my family did too, but her family, being such a large family, would collect the moss, harvest the moss, and they built a little fence in the bayou where the current wouldn't take the moss away. And after maybe a 2 or 3 weeks stay in the water, it would take that oxygen, that air supply, the moss would start to die, and then they would put it on the banks of the bayou, and the sun would actually dry all that gray, and it would really rot off, and then you'd be left with that fiber. The huts, that our people lived in, mats and mattresses where, mats were first and the mattress were stuffed with that. So a very good fiber, many, many uses. If you find a sofa or a chair today, it might be stuffed with moss, and that's antique. You have a collector's item there. The first person in my family to create the flowers was my mom, and that happened in 1944. We left our home on Bayou DuLarge here to travel to a camp that they would trap in the wintertime. And that was before, like I said, that was the first year they were married, 1944, and she wanted flowers for her house. So as they fished, she would collect the garfish scales, and she would use the clay from the bayou side, the blue clay, tag gras as we call it. She would take it, form a little ball, and take those scales and form a flower out of it and get a limb from a tree, a twig, and make the branch. I started, I guess, maybe in 1975 when my dad caught maybe an 8-foot alligator gore, and the scales were beautiful, and that's when she shared her story as to what she did with them. The other story that came from her was that our people, our native people, used the scales as arrow points. And this is a small one, but like I say, it's got the perfect shape of an arrowhead. And like sometimes we'd meet some of our native people from up north. And I remember one time at the Superdome, they had some event, and some of the native people from up north had come from South Dakota, and they were amazed. They looked at the flowers and thought it was, plastic or ceramic or whatever. And when I told him fish scales, it's like he just shook his head, couldn't believe that. And so I went on to tell him that, we still have our people that fish for the alligator gore, and we use the scales. And I said, and the other thing I said, our people used them, our people, native people from Florida to Texas used them for arrow points. And I said, when y'all were chipping away at that piece of rock to form that perfect arrowhead, I said, we had ready-made and food on the table on top of that. We know that our children, and especially grandchildren, are going to be moving away from here. So we have to prepare them, to teach them. We have to pass this tradition on. We have to show them how to cure Spanish moss, and how to collect and harvest the moss, how to harvest the palmetto and cure the palmetto for it to be used, and also even the garfish scales, as you see on here. It's all a process that they can take with them. Passing our traditions on, like I said, it's one thing for us to pass it on to our people, to make it known how we do things, but also by sharing these traditions, it binds us in a sense, because especially Louisiana, how do they describe us? As a bowl of gumbo, and we are one important ingredient in that gumbo. I'm going to take my brother's word, my older brother, Kirby Verrett, who's also a Methodist pastor. Since 1992, when Andrew hit us, it was one of the most devastating hurricanes to hit this community. And volunteers came from all over the country. And he would tell them, and they would come to church, and he would tell them, t'es pas un étranger, t'es juste un ami de y avait pas rencontré. You're not a stranger, you're just a friend that we hadn't met yet.